How would you feel if someone told you that everything in your life is predetermined? That the past, present, and future exist simultaneously and all our attempts to change anything are doomed to failure in advance? Not so long ago, a revolutionary hypothesis appeared claiming that this is exactly the case. Professor Bradford Scouse theory states that time does not flow linearly from the past to the future, but is always present. The doctor made a simple analogy. Suppose you look at our universe as if we were looking down at a piece of paper. In this case, we would see how time spreads simultaneously in all directions, just like the space around us. It turns out that we feel time as linear only because it is the maximum of what the human brain is capable of. And the most interesting thing is, Professor Scouse is not the first to doubt the reality of our perception of time. Back in 1915, Einstein introduced the theory of a single spacetime. If we abstract, then our reality can be seen as a four-dimensional vector space. This is the so-called block theory. The distinction between the past, present, and future is just a persistent illusion. According to Einstein's theory, it is quite reasonable to think of the block universe as actually existing. Drive. Scouse fully shares the point of view of the great physicist. He argues that time and events do not pass us by and then disappear completely. According to the theory of Scouse, everything that has passed exists simultaneously in different parts, blocks of our universe. The professor explains the inability of an ordinary person to look into the future or bring back the past by saying that we cannot go beyond our block. All proven cases of predictions and prophecies fit neatly into this theory. It is logical that the outstanding prophets simply gained access to another block of the universe. They were able to look beyond the edge of our world. This theory fundamentally changes our understanding of time travel. If it's real, then we can't just travel through time and change it. The grandfather's paradox is impossible. Within our block of the universe, we can only travel through time at the normal speed of light and experience it as it is. Another question is if there are different blocks of the universe and someone manages to look into them, at least out of the corner of their eye, then it is quite possible to be there completely. This means that our future, as well as the past, will one day become accessible to the public. The doctor's highly controversial theory has given rise to another equally provocative hypothesis. British physicist Julian Barber believes that when the Big Bang occurred, the universe split into two opposite fronts, our reality and the mirror universe. In our twin, the mirror universe, time goes backwards. People there wake up from death, live in old age and wait until they are young enough to start a career. This is followed by school, kindergarten, and finally, birth and death. It sounds extremely paradoxical. Although if you recall the entertaining film The Mysterious Story of Benjamin Button, it seems very possible. Moreover, if this theory is real, then it provides answers to the most serious questions of fundamental physics. What happened to all the antimatter after the Big Bang of the universe? Why does time only move in one direction? However, we are used to thinking about time in terms of entropy. Entropy is a measure of irreversible energy dissipation. In simple words, it is a measure of chaos. It exists everywhere, in our bodies, computers, mechanisms, in everything that surrounds us. Time moves linearly, entropy turns everything into chaos. We are getting old, cars are rusting, everything is logical. But it is logical only from a Philistine point of view. Professor Sean Carroll of the California Institute of Technology took a different look at time. He considered it in relation to gravity. The scientist calculated the so-called gravitational time dilation, a form of time dilation for an object located in the field of significant gravity. A black hole is the most famous gravitational formation that slows down time. These calculations fully confirm Einstein's theory of relativity. After studying these hypotheses, a simple conclusion suggests itself. If time can be slowed down, then it can be reversed. This provides proof that a mirror universe can indeed exist. All these new radical theories are interesting to discuss. But if at least one of them is correct, then even more questions will arise. If there has always been time, is there any hope for evolution in the sense that we know? Then what is the purpose and meaning of life if we exist as we are, without any hope of deviation from the plan? And most importantly, whose plan is this? But perhaps the point is not to find out the answer, but to look for it. Maybe this is the way to understand our existence. When we begin to study physics, based on the practice of life and accumulated experience, it is easy to imagine the concept of time. We are all used to the fact that the day begins in the morning and the work shift lasts for a certain amount of time. Hence, time is easily represented in the very first physical formulas. For example, we immediately understand that the distance traveled by a body is the speed of this body multiplied by the time it moves. No less familiar to us is the present, the past and the future. Each of us can say without hesitation that in the past he lay and slept on the bed, in the present he is sitting at the computer, and in the future he will go to the store. From the point of view of consciousness and our perception, everything is perfectly outlined and there are no questions. If you question this question, then everything is turned upside down. Doubt is the cause of scientific knowledge. Now let's analyze what the future or the past is from the point of view of physics and the existing understanding. Philosophy should be let go, because there is nothing to fix the understanding of time in this direction of knowledge. Understanding both the past and the future rests on the concept of time. Based on the knowledge of physics, time is a certain quantity that is a measurement, but time itself does not exist. Our knowledge of time and the speed of its flow is based on the use of simple devices that compare the amount of time with the speed of a certain process. For example, the movement of a gear or the rate of energy emission by an atom. To represent the abstractness of this value, it is easy to conduct a thought experiment. We know that night follows day. Now let's fly an airplane around the Earth at the speed of day and night. We will either constantly observe the day or constantly contemplate the night. It turns out that time does not change and has stopped. Based on the classical view, no. Based on the function of consciousness, yes. One more task. A runner runs 100 meters in 15 seconds. He can also run this 100 meters in 10 seconds if he eats spinach. It turns out that if you measure time not by clocks, but by athletes, then he can literally accelerate the passage of time. This means that all our knowledge about time ends up on the system of measuring this time. That is why physics describes time as a conventional unit. Quantum physics has generally abandoned such a unit as time. Time does not disappear there, it just does not figure in global processes. Now let's think about the difference between the past and the future. Based on the existing understanding of time, the past no longer exists, the future does not exist yet. There is a present between them, but the present is measured by the length of time that we have chosen for ourselves. No physicist will tell you that the present is a period of time, which is equal to the seconds, for example. The time of the present is based on an understanding of the current process. For example, the process of emitting radioactive radiation by bismuth is also real, only it lasts a little longer than the life of the universe. This is how physics describes the concept of the present. The future and the past are a little more complicated. After all, there must be some difference at the physical level and we can draw a parallel understanding. Physics describes this with the concept of the arrow of time, and the past and the future are connected by this arrow. There is also the principle of causality, which describes the course of events. One event cannot happen earlier than the event that causes it, and it's hard to argue here. This is logical, correct, does not violate the principle of causality, and is a demonstration of the arrow of time. Now let's go back in time and kill our grandfather. But then we couldn't exist either, could we? This is the paradox of the murdered grandfather, which science fiction writers love so much. Such a picture is possible only in one case, that the future and the past exist simultaneously. There is a very interesting assumption that describes the actual confirmation of the existence of the solution to the paradox of the murdered grandfather by the simultaneous existence of both the past and the future. It contains the result of an experiment with a photon, which actually describes that if in the future we move a plate through which a beam of light passes, then in the past the photon, as if knowing the result of our action, will behave in a certain way. The past and the future are separated there by the logic of the particle velocity. It's about as if we knowingly, without knowing about the presence of a gap in the road, would have gone the other way. Physics has fixed this inconvenient example with a photon and there is no answer yet. But still, what exactly separates and distinguishes the future and the past from the point of view of physics? Physics has come to the conclusion that the difference between these concepts exists only in our heads. Einstein wrote that physicists believe that the separation between the past, present and future is just an illusion, although convincing. It's hard to argue with that. We found out that for physics, this period of time is only what is measured by the clock. The state of matter, based on the paradox of the murdered grandfather and the latest research, there are only frames in the film on film. These states have already been there, it remains to concentrate our consciousness on the right moment or on the right frame. But here we turn again to subjective understanding and hypotheses. In fact, one thing can definitely be said, there are states for matter and the objects around us. It is these states that physics can call the past and the future. They will differ only in that physics knows about these differences. But we cannot yet say what time interval passes between these states without our personal perception, just as we cannot say whether physics is capable of returning the body to this state. In terms of philosophy, everything is true, but physics can argue with this.